for sure. The Giants started the year averaging 15 points a game, and they lost their first 2 games of the year. They hand things over to Daniel Jones, and they have won each of the last 2 weeks. And now all of a sudden they are 2-2 entering week number 5.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy HP, and you're listening to the Unsportsmanlike Conduct Podcast, a podcast for the average Joe covering football and everything New York Giants. Let's get right into this episode. This is episode 23, and folks, as you've heard from the opening clip of this podcast episode, the Giants are now 2-2 with their recent home victory against the Washington Redskins, winning 24-3. This was a really interesting game. There was a lot of sloppiness. I felt like it was also a slow game. And it was also a boring game as well. There weren't many big plays or too many plays that sort of had me jump off my seat. The defense obviously creates a lot of turnovers. They were getting some pressure on both Case Keenum and Dwayne Haskins. Overall, it was a slow game, but I'll take the win. I'll take these wins however they come because as all New York Giants fans know, these wins don't come easy, and they don't come often for the New York Giants. So I'll take these as they come. The New York Giants are currently on a 2-game winning streak. And I don't know if everyone remembers, but I had released a podcast episode doing a game-by-game, week-by-week win-loss prediction. I had the New York Giants dropping the first 2 games against the Dallas Cowboys and the Buffalo Bills. And I told everyone we'd get on the winning column against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then we continue our winning streak against the Washington Redskins, creating a 2-game winning streak. So now I want to get right into Daniel Jones because that's obviously everyone. That's obviously everyone sort of the player that everyone's sort of honing in on and has the microscope over. So Daniel Jones had a pretty decent game. They were firing on all cylinders right out the gate, and we scored some pretty 2 quick drives. First 2 drives of the New York Giants offense, we ended up scoring touchdowns. The first drive ended up in a passing touchdown to Wayne Gallman, who was wide open out of the flats. Thankfully, Daniel Jones found him, and a really interesting thing about that play was, Daniel Jones took the snap, and you can see he was looking to the left, he was looking into the middle. As the routes were progressing, he realized that those guys weren't open. So his receivers on the left, his receivers in the middle of the end zone were not open. Once he realized that, he sort of shifted his eyes to the far right and sees Wayne Gallman wide open. And to be honest, I feel like that's something that Eli Manning in today's game probably would have missed. And I'm not saying Eli Manning always misses wide open plays like that or isn't able to sort of go through his progressions like that. But I feel like at that point, Eli Manning may have forced the throw into double coverages, maybe into the middle of the end zone, or even maybe thrown away. But Daniel Jones showed on that play that he's able to go through route progressions, not panic, and then look for the wide open receiver. And he found Wayne Gallman wide open out of the flat for an easy walk-in touchdown. Then the following offensive drive, Daniel Jones drives the ball down the field. We had a couple of big plays there, and Wayne Gallman rushes in for an easy touchdown as well. And the New York Giants are up 14-zip. And then right before that as well, I believe we had picked off Case Keenum, which ended up helping us sort of score the ball easier. But I want to sort of stick on the offense before I do talk about the defense. I think Daniel Jones, again, played a pretty decent game. I think he ended up completing over 70% of his passes and throwing for 225 yards. Daniel Jones was 23 of 31, threw 225 yards, and threw a passing touchdown, which I've just mentioned was to Wayne Gallman. He did, however, throw 2 interceptions. And both of those interceptions were trying to find Sterling Shepard. And, it was a little... These interceptions weren't head-scratching interceptions. Were they interceptions that I wasn't happy about? Of course, because no one wants your offense to turn the ball over. But we also have to realize to not overreact and not sort of have this end-of-the-world mentality, especially because we have a rookie quarterback that's under center. And, if this will make you feel better, we've seen the opposing team's rookie quarterback, Dwayne Haskins, play, and he didn't play, nowhere near the ball or at the level of Daniel Jones has played, not only in this game, but the last game. But overall, I thought Daniel Jones made smart decisions, got the ball out quick. I mean, there were times where right off the snap, you see Daniel Jones just fire that ball quickly on quick crossing routes and quick slant routes to Sterling Shepard. And even Evan Ingram. But those 2 interceptions were a little discouraging because I thought that those throws were in tight coverages. And sometimes I think quarterbacks, especially rookie quarterbacks, need to understand not to always take these bad chances. Because we saw the first interception was on a comeback route. Quinton Dunbar was sitting right there on the ball. He was able to jump that route easily. On a comeback route, I mean, on man coverage, on a comeback route, that's one of the more easiest sort of routes for a DB to recover on. Because the wide receiver isn't running anymore. And for those of you who don't know what a comeback route is, usually wide receivers will run about maybe 7 to 10 yards up and then stop, plant their foot, turn back around and look for the ball. And it's usually right before the receiver turns back around, the quarterback lets that ball fire. Usually in those instances, if a receiver is really, really fast and is known to sort of take the top off the defense, a cornerback has a tendency of sort of taking a couple more steps back, anticipating a go route. In this instance, Quinton Dunbar pretty much read that route pretty well, and he was able to recover and hop on that route and get that interception. So that was a pretty easy interception for Quinton Dunbar. Granted, it wasn't something that Quinton Dunbar walked into. Dunbar had to make a good play on that ball. So that's why I don't think it was one of those interceptions where I think we've seen Eli in the past throw it wide open into DB's hands. Sometimes Eli Manning throws interceptions and we don't see receivers around the vicinity of where the interception was played. So this was something where I think Daniel Jones, he saw the one-on-one on that comeback route and he ended up throwing an interception, which was costly to us. And I think that was sort of a momentum breaker because we were just coming off of a two straight drives of 2 straight touchdowns. And then he ends up throwing a back-to-back interception. So he throws another interception on a crossing route, which also could have been a slant route, I believe. And I think Sterling Shepard was also the target on that. And that was just an underthrown ball, but also a really great play by Quinton Dunbar. I mean, Quinton Dunbar had to die for that ball, folks. It wasn't like Quinton Dunbar walked right into that interception. I mean, these were tough plays, right? There weren't that many sort of yards after the interceptions. These DBs were down. So I think, granted, you don't want to see a quarterback, have that many interceptions or have turnovers, but he's a rookie quarterback, and I don't think those interceptions were bad plays. And then there was another throw where Josh Norman was about to intercept, and that was going to be 3 straight interceptions. That was at the end of the it was towards the end of the first half, and I think the Giants had the ball last at this point where we were driving the ball down the field, but thankfully Norman had dropped the pass. Again, this is another play where I thought, it was one-on-one and Daniel Jones tried to take a chance, but it was slightly underthrown, and I don't know if everyone remembers how that play went. Josh Norman had to jump over the receiver and sort of kind of dive over the receiver to try to make that play. So it was a tough play for Josh Norman to even make, which is why he wasn't able to hold on to the ball. But other than that, Daniel Jones went 23 for 31. So aside from 3 bad passes, if you really think about it, Daniel Jones had 3 bad passes. So 31? So he technically, to me, I feel like he went 23 of 28. Right? He had those 3 bad passes, but he went 28 of his 31 passes were fine passes. They were just incompletes. There were at times, not too often, where I felt like Daniel Jones, especially in the beginning of the drives, beginning of the game in the first quarter, where Daniel Jones, he takes the snap and too quickly he sort of decides to roll out. And, the thing that I'm afraid of having a mobile quarterback is a quarterback who wants to use his legs more than trusting his arm. And, Daniel Jones isn't that type of quarterback. Daniel Jones has a good enough arm to make plays with his arms, and, hopefully he doesn't rely on his legs too much. But again, I didn't see too much of that throughout the game. Just in the beginning of the game, that was a little bit concerning. And I thought this was maybe coming from the fact that he had such a successful game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers running the ball that I thought he was going to do that. But thankfully, he kind of sort of just settled down and didn't do that as much. He did have also a very successful rushing game, though. He had he carried for 5 times, 33 yards. And there was especially this one big play that went for 16 yards where he actually gets hit and touched by 2 defensive linemen, ends up spinning out of the pocket, runs up and gets a first down for 16 yards to keep that play alive, which I believe was a 3rd and long situation too. And just instances like that where you kind of, look, I love Eli Manning to death. He was the first quarterback I've ever watched, and I'm not trying to knock him or anything. He did give me 2 Super Bowls, but it's plays like this where you kind of realize, Eli Manning would have went down on that play. These are just one of many instances that in today's game and even against Tampa Bay where we're seeing Daniel Jones keeping plays alive. And that's, again, that's another takeaway that I've had in this game, is that Daniel Jones is able to keep plays alive. He didn't get sacked many times. I don't even think he got sacked at all. I think he got sacked maybe one. No, he didn't get sacked at all. There were 4 quarterback hits. The Redskins had 4 quarterback hits and 0 sacks. I thought overall the offensive line played good, but I also thought Daniel Jones was able to shift and move around the pocket to sort of get away from the pressure. And then I want to talk about sort of the MVP, the most valuable player of today's game, is Wayne Gallman. So as everyone knows, Saquon Barkley got hurt last week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and is probably going to be out between 4 to 6 weeks, maybe even 8 weeks. And I think at this point people were like, well, they lost their number one weapon. What are they going to do? And how's Wayne Gallman going to fare? Wayne Gallman didn't have the greatest rushing game, and that overall I felt like the Giants weren't that great rushing. There were a lot of 3-yard gains, 2-yard gains. There was a good, maybe decent, a couple of times it showed where we had 4 or 5-yard gains, but overall I wasn't too impressed with how we were running the ball. This is the second straight game. Like we had a tough time running the ball against Tampa Bay, and we had a tough time running the ball today against the Redskins. 2 pretty good formidable front sevens, but nevertheless, Gallman finished with 18 carries and 63 yards. That's under 4 yards per carry. That's 3.5 yards per carry, which isn't that great. He did have one good run, which is up the sideline for 22 yards, and that's essentially a third of his total yards of his total yards on the ground. 22 yards came on one carry, and he had a total of 63 yards. So not the greatest rushing game from Gallman. We did have backup Jonathan Hilliman, who's the rookie running back who we sort of signed, who went undrafted from Rutgers. He went 10 for 33. Again, 3.3 yards per carry, so that's not something that's, we can really rely on to get this offense going. But one thing I do admire about Pat Shurmur is that he stuck with the running game. He didn't shy away from the running game. Even if we were getting 2 yards, 3 yards, he continuously relied on the running game because that's what you have to do. You have to try to take pressure off of the quarterback. I think last game Daniel Jones threw for 36 attempts. This game Daniel Jones threw for 31 attempts. And it kind of helps when you're up big early on in games where you don't have to rely on your quarterback to throw so many times. But I'm really glad that we sort of stuck with the ground game even if it wasn't always working for us. I think a big wide receiver sweep play from Sterling Shepard for a gain of 23 yards, that certainly helped our running game as well. But overall, I don't think the running backs didn't do that great. We did finish with 164 rushing yards, but you do have to keep in mind that includes that 23-yard rush from Sterling Shepard, and then the 33 yards rushing from Daniel Jones. So, again, we do have to improve on that. The offensive line just has to find a way to push up opposing defensive lines and find a way to pull better and open up these holes for our running backs. Because this is 2 straight weeks where the running game is a little concerning for me. Not too over the top concerning, but just a little bit concerning. But the MVP, Wayne Gallman, again, 18 carries, 63 yards, had that touchdown, which was a goal line carry. Thankfully he was able to get into the end zone and the goal line because we've seen, this is where teams usually struggle. When you're within 5 yards of the end zone, teams usually struggle with getting the ball into the end zone and converting those situations and opportunities into touchdowns. So I'm glad, Gallman was able to convert that into a touchdown rather than, kicking a field goal while we were 5 yards out from the end zone. So that was a good sign. And then Wayne Gallman also had a great game from a receiving standpoint, 6 receptions, 55 yards, and also had a touchdown. That receiving touchdown, again, as I previously mentioned, came on that opening drive. Wayne Gallman had 7 targets. And I want to talk about Wayne Gallman for a bit because everyone who's followed my podcast from probably episode 1, which dropped on March 24th of this year, you guys know my take on Wayne Gallman. I stated this. I said, while Saquon Barkley is obviously way better of a talent and way better of a running back than Wayne Gallman is, I thought Wayne Gallman was a suffice enough running back where we didn't maybe need to draft Saquon Barkley at the year and the draft that we drafted Saquon Barkley because I honestly wanted one of those 3 quarterbacks. Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, or Josh Rosen. Because again, and I've said this ever since I started my podcast, those 3 quarterbacks, and even including Josh Allen from the Buffalo Bills, those 4 quarterbacks are quarterbacks that are supposed to lead the NFL for the next decade. Granted, Josh Rosen hasn't had the greatest start because, he's kind of gotten screwed over by the Arizona Cardinals and the Miami Dolphins, but nevertheless, these were quarterbacks of our generation that we passed up on for a running back. So, at that time, because Gallman sort of started the last 4 games of that season prior to the draft where we drafted Saquon Barkley, and Gallman, he showed capabilities that he was a dual threat running back. So I thought heading into that season he'd be our lead back, and maybe we'd have Paul Perkins, which again I know Paul Perkins hasn't worked out, and I don't even know if Paul Perkins is even active on our roster anymore. But that's what I thought our running backs were going to shape out to be. Not complaining that we have Saquon Barkley, but I guess my point is to say Wayne Gallman is no scrub. Wayne Gallman, I believe, was also the lead back in Clemson before he got drafted. Wayne Gallman can ball. And he showed that today, and so I'm not too concerned now. If Wayne Gallman can produce, similar type numbers, this is going to be a big thing for the New York Giants offense, because it's almost as if we didn't skip a beat. Now, Wayne Gallman's a different type of runner than Saquon Barkley, because Wayne Gallman, while he's a tough runner, he's not an elusive runner, and he can't break tackles. Wayne Gallman's one of those guys where he may not come down at the first hit, and he's able to fight for another yard or two, but he's not an elusive running back. He can't juke he can't juke in space or beat guys one-on-one. I didn't see a lot of that in today's game. But there weren't also many opportunities for Wayne Gallman to run in space because, again, as we've seen, he only got 3.5 yards per carry. So, more to come on that. But, Saquon Barkley obviously is a better runner than Wayne Gallman is and can create more yards even without holes. So that's sort of the main difference between the two guys. I think Wayne Gallman's going to, be more productive as these holes open up from a run game standpoint. But we've seen from a receiving standpoint, he's just as good as Barkley is. Just doesn't run well enough as Barkley when they're in space, because Barkley can run like a wide receiver when he catches the ball in space. Gallman can't necessarily do that. And, Gallman, he's obviously a bit more slower than Barkley, and there was a wheel route, and I forgot what quarter and what drive it was, but there was a wheel route where Daniel Jones was going to find Wayne Gallman, and it wasn't going to be a touchdown because there was a safety over the top that probably would have ended up pushing him out of bounds, but it would have went for a big gain, and Wayne Gallman was just a little too slow on that. And he was unable to reach over the top, but that was going to be a beautiful dime by Daniel Jones had Wayne Gallman been able to sort of turn on the burners and go after that ball. But overall, great game by Wayne Gallman, showed his dual threat abilities, and to be able to lose someone like Saquon Barkley and then to have Wayne Gallman come in and sort of produce the same way Saquon Barkley would have is certainly something that was helpful for Daniel Jones and took a lot of pressure off of Daniel Jones as well. From a receiving standpoint, again, Sterling Shepard showed why he's our number 1 wide receiver. 7 receptions, 76 yards, 9 targets. Evan Ingram, 4 receptions, 54 yards with 7 targets. 7 targets is good. 7 to 10 targets shows that you are a big player in the offense, but, I wish he would have been involved a little bit more. There were more, he had that one big reception for 31 yards, which was a crossing route, which that was the same type of route where the New York Giants had scored against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers opening the second half. Other than that, I felt like Evan Ingram was well contained by the Washington Redskins defense. So hopefully next week against the Minnesota Vikings, we can sort of spread out Evan Ingram more. And I'll get to that in a bit because we do have Golden Tate coming back, which I'm so excited about. So I do look forward to talking about that as I'm done sort of analyzing today's game. But overall, this Washington Redskins defense, they have a good front seven, but I thought, we played well. And Landon Collins was a no-show. He was nowhere to be found. I had the box score pulled up. I'm actually surprised he finished with 9 total tackles. He was getting burned by Evan Ingram. He couldn't cover anything out there. And, which kind of goes to show why maybe Dave Gallman and James Bettcher probably felt comfortable with not re-signing Landon Collins and getting a cheaper and younger version in Jabril Peppers, who had a tremendous game today. One thing I do want to kind of quickly touch on is I realized from an offensive standpoint, we didn't really have a lot of big plays. We didn't take too many shots, and I guess, you're not going to take too many shots when you're up early and you're up big and the defense is able to sort of slow down of the opposing team's offense. So I understand why maybe at that point, maybe Pat Shurmur was reluctant to sort of take a lot of shots, given that he probably didn't want to, sort of force a lot of turnovers, even though obviously Daniel Jones did throw 2 interceptions, but I kind of did want to see some more big plays. I wanted them to utilize Darius Slayton a bit more. Slayton ended up finishing with 2 catches for 13 yards. And those 2 catches came out of 2 targets. My expectation was that he'd end up getting maybe at least 5 targets, and I wanted Darius Slayton to go long. Let's stretch that defense. Let's burn the top over that defense. But we really didn't see that a lot, and I think that probably could have helped, refrain from Daniel Jones throwing even some of his interceptions. Maybe instead of 2 interceptions, he throws 1 interception because we're able to sort of stretch the defense out and stretch those defensive backs out and spread them out a bit. But I didn't see a lot of that going on. I felt there was a lot of crowding going on with the routes and the receiver sort of route distribution of where they were lining up within the field. I saw a lot of trips bunches, and in those trips bunches, I saw a lot of receivers together. So I hope maybe next week against the Minnesota's defense, who's a pretty good, tough defense, they're able to sort of spread that out a little bit more. That's sort of the only, I wouldn't say knock, but sort of wish that I would have seen. There were a couple of big plays. I mean, Wayne Gallman had a 22-yard rush. Obviously, Daniel Jones had that big 16-yard run after dodging and sort of, eating a couple of hits and tackles. And then Sterling Shepard did have that big sweep play for 20 yards. But then after that, from a passing standpoint, I felt like there weren't that many shots. I feel like there were more maybe yards after the catch rather than big plays. That's what guys like Sterling Shepard and Evan Ingram, they were able to do, is they were able to, catch balls in stride and sort of run up the sideline, where I sort of wanted those big plays to happen before even yards after the catch are generated. So hopefully we can see a lot of more big plays generated and more shots generated next week against the Minnesota Vikings, because I think, our offensive sort of slowed down in the second half. We scored 14 points in the first half. I think we had that field goal, which had us at 17-3 in the second half. But then after that, we really weren't able to generate points on the offense. So, with that said, when we only scored 7 points in the second half, and those 7 points came off of a pick six. So we had 17 in the first half, and then after that, the offense wasn't really able to generate any points. We kind of slowed down a bit. The Washington Redskins were able to sort of, settle down and sort of be able to contain us a bit more. And I think the reason why is because, well, for one, yes, we were up big, so we didn't take too many chances, but we also didn't, because we weren't taking too many shots, we were relying heavily on the run game. We ran the ball for about 30 times. We ran the ball 37 times. And if you want to take away the 5 carries from Daniel Jones, then we still ran the ball 32 times. So, we rushed the ball. We rushed for 32 times, technically, without the Daniel Jones carry. And then even if you want to take away the Sterling Shepard sweep play, we still rushed for 30 yards, which is a lot. So, hopefully we can take more big plays. I want to see those targets go up for Darius Slayton. And also, does anyone know why T.J. Jones is not playing and why Benny Fowler and Cody Latimer are playing? I mean, Cody Latimer, I understand that he knows the offense better and he's been with the New York Giants for a couple of years, but this guy is one of the most slowest receivers on our team. He has trouble creating separation. At least T.J. Jones is a little bit more faster and quicker to create separation. I'm not saying T.J. Jones by any means is an outstanding route runner, but he is certainly more serviceable than Cody Latimer. Cody Latimer is someone you use when your number 1 and number 2s go down. But nevertheless, still a good sort of overall game for the New York Giants. Obviously, still a great win by the New York Giants and that offense. Again, just heading into next week, we do got to cut down those turnovers. Daniel Jones can't be throwing 2 interceptions every game. Wayne Gallman shouldn't be fumbling it. And then Jonathan Hillman fumbled right when we were at the sort of the end zone. Right when we were in the red zone, Jonathan Hillman fumbles it right by, the 2-yard line. I mean, that's probably an easy touchdown or at least 3 points. So, I feel like maybe even some of those instances where that sort of prevented us from scoring more points than we probably should have. And but look, overall, I thought the offense again was fine and definitely better than weeks prior. And now I want to talk about the defense. The defense once again was able to put pressure on the opposing team's quarterbacks. We had 8 quarterback hits, which resulted in 3 sacks. That's sort of in line with what we were able to do the last couple of weeks against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Buffalo Bills. We had, again, 8 quarterback hits, which resulted in 3 sacks, and we also picked off Case Keenum once and picked off Dwayne Haskins, rookie quarterback for the Washington Redskins, the guy who was upset because the Giants passed on him. We picked him off 3 times. Jabril Peppers ends up finally getting his first interception with the New York Giants. Had a great game, not only from that interception, because that interception sealed the game, put the game out of reach. That was the interception that put us from 17-3 to 24-3. The Giants weren't able to score a point in the second half to put this game away. Jabril Peppers came up big, jumped on that route, which was an out route, jumped the route, picked the ball off, and ran straight to the end zone. Had a couple of deflections too, and there was a big deflection he had on the end towards the end zone when he was defending. When he was defending Sprinkle, which is I believe the Washington Redskins tight end. He had a big deflection there at the end towards that end zone, and that was just huge because that could have been a touchdown if Jabril Peppers doesn't get a hand in there. But he's really happy for Jabril Peppers. Ended up having 6 total tackles, 2 pass deflections, and obviously that interception that went for a pick 6. Unfortunately, we did lose Ryan Connolly, our inside linebacker. Connolly was playing pretty well for us. He did catch that tip pass by Janoris Jenkins early in the first quarter for an interception. He also had a sack on the drive right after. Ryan Connolly has reportedly torn his ACL. He is going to go for an MRI tomorrow. But most likely we will be losing him for the season. But Ogletree should be back next week. And, one of my Twitter followers made a good point. David Mayo from Texas State, he ended up coming in for Ryan Connolly. He ended up leading the team with tackles. He led the whole team with tackles. So that's a good sign that someone who replaced one of our linebackers that was supposed to be the rising star for the New York Giants was able to lead the team in tackles. So definitely also look out for David Mayo. Janoris Jenkins had a great bounce-back game, ended up having 2 interceptions, and he also caused 1 interception. So he ended up also picking, that's exactly what you want to do is wreak havoc, bounce back from a bad game. I mean, look, Mike Evans is an elite receiver. Anyone can have a bad game against them. But Janoris Jenkins sort of, came back strong and had a great game. And you can just see the energy on that whole New York Giants defense. And I do want to talk about those 8 quarterback hits and those 3 sacks that we had. Because those sacks and those hits came from the usual suspects on our team. They came from Ryan Connolly, Oshane Jimenez once again, Marcus Golden, Dalvin Tomlinson. It was those guys that were wreaking havoc. I mean, even Dexter Lawrence was breaking up the pocket, crumbling the pocket, and forcing the quarterbacks to scramble in and out. I mean, we probably should have had way more sacks. I think we should have had maybe 3 more sacks. We weren't able to hit the quarterback often, but I'll take 8 quarterbacks hits. I think this team is destined for every week from here on out to get between 3 to 5 sacks a game. I think we're that good. And granted, I know that the Redskins were missing 2 of their offensive linemen. We all know with Trent Williams, and I believe their starting right guard was out as well with an injury. And then they obviously they had some. Look, they don't have Darius Geis, their starting running back, and they don't have Terry McLaurin, who was out today. So I understand from an offensive standpoint, they weren't all there, they weren't all healthy. But look, nevertheless, to force a team for 3 points, I mean, this New York Giants team is, they were flying all over the ball. I mean, we didn't give up too many yards after the catch. We didn't give up that many big plays. The reason why the Redskins scored 3 points is because Daniel Jones threw an interception, and that interception ended up allowing the Redskins to be in their own in New York Giants territory. But it wasn't like they were driving the ball down the field and getting, first downs after first downs after first downs. I mean, we did a solid job. And our run defense finally stepped up and stuffed the opposing team. 17 carries for 55 yards is what the Washington Redskins had. Peterson carried for 11 times for 28 yards, and then Thompson had 4 carries for 4 yards. Dwayne Haskins did have 2 pretty big runs that ended up resulting in first downs, but other than that, I mean, we were stifling today. And granted, look, I know the Washington Redskins aren't that talented of a team right now. They are suffering from some injuries and some sort of coaching identities right now. Jay Gruden probably is most likely on his way out of Washington. But still, I mean, our Giants defense played really well today. And if you think about it, take a step back. There's been 6 quarters. If you go from the second half of that Tampa Bay game, the Giants have let up 6 points in the last 6 quarters. Have gotten 7 sacks in the last 6 quarters. I mean, that is fantastic. That's fantastic. And I don't care. Look, and everyone's going to talk about the level of talent that we've been playing today, and then even Tampa Bay. But Tampa Bay is giving the Los Angeles Rams right now currently a run for their money, scoring 40-plus points. And then let's say if we lost to the Washington Redskins, then everyone would be bashing the New York Giants for not being able to beat a team that's winless and not being able to compete against a team that doesn't have that much talent all over the field. So I don't want to hear this whole nonsense about, oh, well, you beat crappy teams. No, we didn't beat crappy teams. We beat NFL professionals. The Giants don't pick who they get to play. Trust me, if the Giants wanted to pick who they wanted to play, they'd pick the Miami Dolphins all 16 weeks. Don't blame teams for their strength of schedule. Don't blame teams for winning against the teams that they should be. That's a good sign. So for New York Giants fans, that's a good sign that we were able to dominate the Washington Redskins today. It is not easy in the NFL to hold a team by 3 points. How often do you see that? You don't see that very often. And the only reason why I honestly think we probably could have shut them out. The only reason why they got 3 points is because an interception by Daniel Jones allowed the Redskins to be in Giants territory to get close enough for a field goal. This Giants defense played really, really well. And, I think the NFL is all about momentum right now. And, don't be surprised if next week against the Minnesota Vikings, they continue the streak where they're able to sort of get pressure on Kirk Cousins and then force turnovers, because this is 2 straight weeks where we've been able to force interceptions. And that's what I want to get into now. I want to get into the next week. I want to get into that Minnesota Vikings game because I want to maybe just take a couple of steps back into my podcast episode where I did a game-by-game and week-by-week prediction. I had us losing again. The first 2 games, I had us starting off 0-2, and then I had us winning the next 2 games, just the way we did. So right now, granted, I don't want to be right when I predict our losses, but I'm 100% correct on my prediction so far. We are 2-2. I had us going 2-2 at this point at the end of the Washington Redskins game. But then I also had our 2-game winning streak ending next week against Minnesota Vikings at the time of my prediction. But you know what? And I mentioned this before when I did my podcast to do that game-by-game and week-by-week prediction. As I go through the weeks and give my post-game reactions, I'm also going to do an analysis of what I think is going to happen in the next game. And all of that is adaptive. And so even though I did have us originally losing against the Vikings during the offseason, there's just new energy and new life to this New York Giants team that I haven't seen in the last couple of years. I don't know if it's because Daniel Jones is starting that this offense just got this revitalized energy, because I'm even seeing this energy on the defense. I mean, this defense has some swagger in it now. We can get to the opposing team's quarterback. We are hitting the quarterback. We are getting sacks and forcing turnovers. And you know what? We're facing a quarterback next week in Kirk Cousins who knows how to force turnovers. He can get hectic, he can get crazy, and he has a lot of sort of heat check moments. And also, he can't even find some of his receivers open. And look, we're going to face a very talented Minnesota Vikings offense, so it's going to be tough. I'm not saying we're going to be as stifling as we were, the last 6 quarters, including today's game and then the second half against Tampa Bay. But look, Tampa Bay, they just scored 54 points against the Los Angeles Rams. So we held that team in the second half to 3 points. That offense, to me, from an overall sort of air attack standpoint, is better than the Minnesota Vikings, because we've seen this year the Minnesota Vikings are not an air attack team anymore. They do not rely on Kirk Cousins and that passing game. Stephon Diggs has had a slow start to the season with the exception of today's game against the Chicago Bears, but they've only scored 6 points against the Chicago Bears. And don't get me wrong, I'm not comparing our defense to the Chicago Bears defense. I know that the Bears defense is an outlier and that any team would struggle against that defense. But they barely found Adam Thielen, who's a slot receiver, who's your prototypical receiver who can run in between the seams, run short to intermediate routes. That's the guy that you should be able to find easily every single game, and Kirk Cousins has failed to do that, has failed to give Adam Thielen the volume that we're all used to seeing Adam Thielen getting. This team has turned into a run-heavy offense. But you know what? We haven't been gashed up for a lot of yards. We haven't been, giving up too many big run plays. There hasn't been a rusher that's, rushed for over 100 yards. I think for the most part, we've been average from our run defense perspective. And I think the big key to the next week's game is if we can contain Dalvin Cook, the way we're able to contain Ezekiel Elliott. So Ezekiel Elliott in week 1 didn't have the greatest game against the Dallas Cowboys. His he had a decent rushing game. I think he still averaged about 4 yards per carry. I'm actually going to pull it up. But we were able to contain him where Ezekiel Elliott didn't have too many big runs against us. I'm actually going to pull up the stats now. So, yeah, Ezekiel Elliott rushed for 13 times for 53 yards. So he did get 4 yards of carry, and he did get a touchdown. But I don't know if everyone remembers, that game, Ezekiel Elliott didn't have big rushes. It's not like he was running 10, 15, it's not like he was getting 10 to 15-yard gains. It's not like he was running up for big plays up the sideline. He was gradually getting those 4 yards per carry. It wasn't like he was dominating the game. We got dominated from the air attack. But that's different because the Dallas Cowboys have changed their offense where they want to rely on Dak Prescott to throw 30-plus times a game. They want Dak to get 300 to 400 passing yards. This Minnesota Vikings offense is way different in that they're going to rely on Dalvin Cook to carry almost up to 20 times a game. And I think if we can sort of contain Dalvin Cook, keep him between the 70 to 80 yards, maybe give him between 15 to 20 carries, and have him get 70 to 80 total rushing yards, I think we'll have a chance to get to the quarterback, get to Kirk Cousins, force him to throw and force him into long and distance situations, third and long in situations. And Kirk Cousins is one of those quarterbacks that will create turnovers for himself. He throws interceptions. He also fumbles the ball. This Kirk Cousins is not the same Kirk Cousins that's torched us when he was on the Washington Redskins. For some reason, after he signed that big contract with the Minnesota Vikings, he hasn't been the same Kirk Cousins. It's going to be a tough matchup. It's going to be a tough week. And you know what? I expect it to be a high-scoring game. But I think the New York Giants are up to the task because we are coming off of 2 wins. We have way more swagger than the Minnesota Vikings. There's something off about this Minnesota Vikings offense. The fact that they're so reliant on Dalvin Cook to make plays for them, that's literally the be-all and end-all for that offense. We don't have that for us. And we have everyone evenly contributing to our wins. Sterling Shepard gets 6-7 catches. Evan Ingram gets 5, 6, 7 catches. Darius Slayton or other wide receivers like Benny Fowler or Cody Latimer are relied upon to make a big play or two. We've seen today with Wayne Gallman stepping up and making big plays after Saquon Barkley got injured. And then not to forget, next week, we get Golden Tate back. So while I understand that the Minnesota Vikings defense is a formidable defense, and they have talent all over the place from not only their front four, their linebackers, and their secondaries, we are getting our last weapon back, and everyone's going to be healthy. Our offense is going to have Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate, possibly Darius Slayton as our slot receiver, and then Evan Ingram. You know how hard that is going to be to defend? We're going to be able to stretch out that secondary, force them to play some maybe nickel and dime packages. We're going to be able to stretch that defense out, burn them over the top, hopefully. And I think Daniel Jones is going to find himself having a lot of big plays. I think next week we'll be able to, the offense might come a little more easier for Daniel Jones because he gets that extra weapon. And a lot of people don't know, I don't know if people remember, but Daniel Jones played with Golden Tate in preseason. He didn't play with Sterling Shepard or Evan Ingram that much. And even Darius Slayton, because Darius Slayton was hurt all of preseason, but he played with Golden Tate. So him and Golden Tate already built a rapport. I don't know, man. And think about it like this. Golden Tate missed the first 4 games, and it wasn't even because of an injury. It was because of a suspension. So Golden Tate's probably as healthy as ever because he didn't play 4 games of the NFL season. And we all know he's in football shape because he played a couple of snaps in preseason for each of the games. So we are getting a healthy, motivated, fresh Golden Tate, along with Sterling Shepard, who's posting up wide receiver number 1 numbers, and Evan Ingram, who's possibly, arguably right now, the number 1 tight end in the league. I expect this offense to be competitive, and I think our defense will have a chance to create a turnover or two that's going to sort of swing the momentum of the game, and it's going to be a close game, but I do have the Giants winning next week against the Minnesota Vikings. Folks, that about wraps it up. That was episode 23 of the Unsportsmanlike Conduct Podcast. Everyone, please make sure you subscribe and also follow me on Instagram. That's _unsportsmanlike_conduct. I'm also on Twitter, so everyone, please make sure you follow me on Twitter. That's _unsportsman. Peace out. Until next time.